Here, I would like to welcome to the stage Payam, a civil engineer from the CEC, and also Sally Blair, director at NORESCO. Both folks who have been longtime contributors to CalBEM, and I'm looking forward to their updates. Thank you.
Thank you. So, wow, that light is bad. Hi, my name is Payam and Bozorgchami. I'm one of the senior engineers at the California Energy Commission on the Building Standards branch. I'm going to do a quick, we got, what, 50 minutes or so, 45 minutes to present two topics. The first topic, I'm going to talk about real quick what's going on in 2025, what we did, and what we're doing moving forward into our next code cycle, which we've already started, the 2028 code cycles. So, don't say that yet. I'm already scared. So, overview of the presentation today. And I'm going to try to get this done in 10 minutes. And the reason I say that, here's some important dates. The code's already adopted. I can't do anything about it now, guys. Adopted September 11th. Haley Buchanan and the ACM team presented the ACM software and the compliance document workshops in November 14th. And we're going for approval on December, sometime in December. We're not sure yet what the date is. Building Standards Commission hasn't given us a date yet. And they're just going to approve. Did the California Energy Commission go through the cycles developing the code? Did we have a public forum? Did we have a public discussions? Did we have 45-day language? Did folks of the public see the language? Did we do a benefit cost analysis? They're not going to listen to anybody saying, hey, we wish Title 24, 2025 had heat pump alterations in Part 6 versus Part 11. They're not going to listen to you. I'm sorry. They're just going to move on. And from then on, with the help of few organizations, Energy Code ACE, the IOU team, the Energy Commission itself will provide training up to the effective date, January 1. The computer software will be available within the 180 days of the approval date of December, for you guys to kick it around and get a familiarity with it and get ready for January 1st, 2026. So, I did the slides backwards a little bit here. I'm showing the benefits of what 2025 did. So in 2025, reality, we estimated that we're going to be saving about $5 billion in energy and avoid about 4.1 million metric tons of CO2 emissions over the next 30 years. That's what our baseline assumption was. If anybody wants these slides, I'll sell them to you afterwards. And a lot of you guys probably seen these. These are exactly the same slides that were used for the adoption hearings, and this is the same slides that others have used. I'm a thief. I just steal things and use them for our presentations. For 2025, we modified the previous metric that we used to use for compliance, the time-dependent value, TDV, as a lot of you folks know it as. And what we did was we added a cost factor, and what it does is just converts the energy savings into a long-term system cost savings to better reflect the actual cost of energy to consumers, utility systems, and society. That's all we did. Conceptually, same topic. The other area that we updated was the source metric. We have to update that every so often just to align with what's happening in the world of fossil fuels, electricity, propane, and so forth. One thing that we did notice that with all the renewables into the building sector, the MOSI so-called, the duck curve is becoming the so-called Christmas turkey. The peak load is shifting from the summer peak into a winter peak. So to protect all the work that we did on efficiency for the summer, we had to come up with a metric to protect the efficiencies that affect you in the summer. The peak has changed because all the renewables in it, but you still have the 115-degree weather that we had, 30 days in a row, whatever it was, that's still there. So how do we protect a homeowner? How do we protect a building? We had to provide this peak cooling metric that prevents somebody to do away with all the efficiencies that we worked hard to put in to protect the mechanical system. So with all that, what happened next? Some code highlights. For 2025, for 2022, we came up with one end use to be heat pump. That was the job of actually the guy sitting next to me, Mazi Sharak, right there, blame him. And then our staff took it on later on and added two end uses, being the mechanical system and the water heat systems for single family to become heat pump baseline. That's your basis of your standards. For multifamily, we added a heat pump water heating per dwelling unit as a base. Some other things that we did, commercial kitchen, they have to be electric ready. Central water heating system for multifamily has to be heat pump based. Updated the requirements for heat pump water heaters for serving individual dwellings for multifamily buildings. Some other metrics, we updated the metric for solar and battery for this code cycle. We added a little bit more. We added different types of building types than what we did in 2022. We updated the third-party verification program. There was a lot of controversy there, but we had to do what we had to do to make sure that the third-party program is working efficiently. Excuse me. We added for efficiency to reduce the gas consumption. We updated the pool and spa requirements for heating. We went through, we revised the lighting languages that's in there. There's a lot of historical language for lighting that our team staff member, Simon Lee, with the help of a lot of folks from the outside industry, Kelly Cunningham, CEA folks, a lot of the energy consultants and electrical engineers got together and helped with that. We improved the multifamily indoor air quality program. There's now a compromisation requirement within the code for health and safety. Pretty much, that was just a high level of everything we did. But remember, 2025 was really, the theme was heat pump. There's some energy code information here. There's some information on what we're doing for our ACM software, computer programs. There's some links here. You're more than welcome to these to see what we're doing, what we've done, what the metrics are, what we're using to come up with the software programs. And like I said, that was already discussed, presented on November 11th of this month. So. And right now, I think we're still in public comment period, so if you want to review the transcripts and you have any comments or concerns, submit them to the docket. It will be evaluated. How to participate for 2028. I said earlier, we're started at 2028 already. We're looking at we're looking at our LSC metric, we're looking at our source energy, we're looking at our peak cooling metric currently, we're looking at updating the weather files. That's all going to be happening. We will be providing a workshop later on where all that will be presented for public comment. The link for more information and to stay tuned and up to speed with everything that's going on. that was it for 2025, guys, real fast. Like I said, we got two topics we're going to discuss in 45 minutes, and I think really what we did is already done. I can't do anything more than what we've done. Information is being out there. We're going to be talking more. We'll be providing training and clarification to the codes. But we are in the process of changing the format of the standards for 2028. The old section numbering and the old metric that we had, the metric, excuse me, that's going to be in place. The old format of the standards, we're revising that. And why are we doing that? We, in the past, many code cycles, we've been getting a lot of criticism that the standards, part 6 of Title 24, is different than the other parts of Title 24. It makes it harder for architects, it makes it harder for engineers, it makes it harder for building officials to enforce, to implement the code. So we've heard that many times, and it got to a point that the commissioner, our Commissioner Andrew McAllister, kind of got tired of hearing this. So he's like, let's figure something out, let's do something. Under the 2019 standards, it started back then, actually it started in 2013, I think it was. But in 2019, we tried to provide an index to the standards. Does that make it easier for you guys? No, the section numbering is still off. All right, what do we do? So, can we do a writable forms, simplify the forms? Is that good enough for you guys? No, go more. So we did. We threw our hands up, hired NORESCO, Sally Blair's team, and Sally Blair and Gina Arota actually came up with an idea to come up with this idea called the shadow codes. And my boss is sitting over there on the right and has told us never to use that term again. He used the word restructured code right there. All right, so I will skip boss and I'll say shadow code once in a while and apologize. It's just so why and how? I think I just explained that. Sally's team got on, rolled their sleeves up, and reached out to the industry, the building industry, not just building officials, everybody, architects, engineers, HERS raters. They had 6 forums, invited a slew of people, about 306 people from the industry participated from all different sectors, and 70% of those people have over 15 years of experience in this industry, in the building code industry. A lot of questions was asked. What are we doing? How are we doing this? What can we do? What should we do? Should we leave it as is? And what are the roadblocks? And what is the ways to alleviate some of those problems? And here's the response. Heck, 90% of them said renumber. Provide tables right underneath the writing, the sections. Provide hyperlinks. And do we want repetition in the language? Do we want to hear cool roofs 10 times within the code in the residential, in the non-residential, in the multifamily? It gets kind of tiresome. So with all that information, Sally took it on and her team and reformatted or restructured the standards, and that work is happening right now. And we call it the shadow code, or we used to call it the shadow code, is because they're taking the 2025 codes, reformatting it to look like the rest of the Title 24 standards for 2028. So the new format is what we're going to be utilizing for taking on requests, proposals from the public. Language cleanup is going to be all the new format. But we don't want everybody to be blindsided, so we're trying to provide that document sooner than later for people to get used to get an understanding of what's going on, how it's formatted. And from here, I'm just going to shut up and sit down and have Sally present the rest of it, because this is pretty interesting.
All right, I'm going to try not to say shadow code. We spent like 8 months calling it the shadow code, so now we're switching. But Payam told me I can't, so I'm going to do my best. Restructured standards. All right, restructured standards. Okay, here we go. So Payam was just saying this is not adopted for 2025. This is an unadopted version. So we're using the adopted language, but we're reorganizing and renumbering. And then the commission will publish this as like a FYI PDF. So it will be for the 2025 code cycle, but it's not going to be the official code. The idea is, though, that it's going to be used for the 2028 rulemaking. So in 2028, the adopted code will be the restructured and the renumbered. Also, I'm super casual, you guys know that. So if you have questions, I say we just raise hands and ask questions. If it gets out of control, Josh can help us get it back in control. Okay, so it'll be an FYI. We're going to try to make that super clear, and then we'll talk more later about what all the features are. We'll talk now about what all the features are. Okay, so we've been talking about it being reorganized and renumbered. The reorganization is probably going to be the biggest change that everybody's going to have to get used to. As Payam was saying, we did a lot of user outreach. Some of you guys participated. Eric Coldrip was on those. I don't know where you are, Eric. Yeah. Josh participated, so some of you guys were on those focus groups and answered the surveys. What we heard from folks is right now the organization of the standards is a little bit haphazard, and you guys can see that on the left in the green. That's the current organization starting with general provisions, and then we kind of go into occupancies, mandatory for all occupancies, then we do mandatory for non-res, then we've got a separate chapter for mandatory lighting, so that's different than how it's done in single family and multifamily. Also, the numbering is different. If you look at the non-residential numbering, it's like 120, 130, 140. If you look at single family, it's all 150, but it's 150.0, 150.1, 150.2. So there's not consistency in the organization or the numbering currently. It's also organized by compliance path, right? That's our language. Energy consultants speak compliance path. Everybody else speaks building system. So if you're an HVAC designer, you're concerned about the requirements for HVAC systems. If you're a lighting contractor, you're concerned about requirements for lighting systems. And in the current organization, those requirements are split up into 4 different chapters. So what we heard the most from users is it's really hard to understand what requirements apply to my project because it's spread all over the code. And then this section is referencing this section, and then you go there, and that section's actually referencing this section over here, so it's like a game, right? We all played that game, and we won it. We know how to navigate the code. Everybody else does not, and they're frustrated about that, so they don't like that. So the idea with the restructures, we're going to organize by building system, so that if you are a lighting designer, you're going to look at Chapter 1, general provisions, Chapter 2, definitions, and Chapter 6, lighting. That's it. You have 3 chapters to look at, and all of the requirements for your project should be in those 3 chapters. Think about it. Architects, engineers, installers, even plans examiners typically are specializing in a building system. They want all their stuff in one place, so they're not having to search the whole code. even within what I call the systems chapters, so the systems chapters are not the general ones, they're like the envelope, HVAC, et cetera. Even within the systems chapters, we're going to get real consistent about organization and numbering. This is more familiar to us. ASHRAE and IECC are consistent about organization and numbering. So we're going to bring that to Part 6. For every systems chapter, the first section will be the mandatory requirements that apply to all occupancies. So for Chapter 3, envelope, that's going to be Section 300. Then 301 is going to be all of the non-residential requirements, 302 single family, 303 multifamily. That numbering and organization is consistent in every systems chapter. So if we're in Chapter 4, HVAC, 400 is mandatory for all occupancies, 401 is non-res, HVAC 402 is single family, HVAC 403 is multifamily HVAC. And then if we go deeper, one level deeper, we can look at non-res. That will also be consistent. So Dot 1 will be general, Dot 2 will be mandatory, Dot 3 will be prescriptive, Dot 4 performance, Dot 5 additions and alterations. So we are going to put all the addition and alterations requirements there within the systems chapters and not have them in a separate chapter. For the restructured standards only, so not for the 2028 adopted standards, but for the restructured, we're going to include the current adopted section numbering within the document. So the new numbering will be first, and then in parentheses right after that will be the adopted section. The reason we're doing that is if you want to use the restructured standards during the 2025 code cycle, if I'm a plans examiner and I want to give a correction comment, I can't say I'm going to give you a comment on 300.1. That's not the adopted code section. So we're putting the code section there so they could say we're going to give you a comment on 110.6, even though they're using the restructured standard to do their work. So hopefully this will help you guys also who are really familiar with the current numbering, kind of reorient and make that connection between the new numbering and the old numbering. Another feature that we talked about a lot was hyperlinking. I think Payam showed like 95% of the focus group participants said, yes, please hyperlink, please, please. So within the document, we'll be hyperlinking all the sections to help people jump around when they need to jump around and navigate more quickly. We're also going to include an index. The current standards, the 2022 standards, do have an index. It's a separate PDF document that is not in the standards document. So when Jean and I were talking about the index during the focus group, everybody was like, what index? What are you talking about? We didn't even know that was there. So first of all, in the adopted 2025 standards, the index is going to be in the same PDF, so that's a nice win. And then we'll also update the index for the restructured standards. What I want to point out here is that the numbering is the consistency in the numbering and how we're organizing it means that you can look at a new section number and get a feel for what occupancy, what building system, and what compliance path just by looking at the number. So we know that 140.3 is non-residential prescriptive requirements. Nobody else knows that because they don't have the code memorized like we do. And so if you look at 301.3.1, then we know Chapter 3 is envelope. So immediately we know 301 means it's an envelope measure. 01 is always going to be non-residential, so we know 301 means non-residential envelope. And then Dot 3 is always prescriptive. So you can look at that section number in the index and know that it's going to be a section describing non-residential prescriptive envelope requirements. Same thing over here with single family. It's still Chapter 3, so that's envelope. 02 is always single family, and Dot 2 is always mandatory. So when you see that number, it's a single family mandatory envelope measure. So hopefully that will help other market actors who don't use the energy code on the daily like we do. They use it periodically. Hopefully that sort of consistent structuring will help them navigate the code a little more easily. This is still up in the air, so we have to see if CEC will let us do this, but the intention here is to italicize defined terms. So we're used to this from other codes. Terminology was a huge discussion, and we did a survey in addition to the focus groups and got a lot of comments about using engineering terminology in the code, and that other industries don't use that same terminology. We also make up our own terminology. I'm looking at you, John McHugh. When we write code language and we're like, what's the best way to describe this? And then we make up our own terminology. It may not be something the industry uses or has ever heard before. They only hear about it when they use the energy code, and that's really confusing to people. So we need folks to know when they read the code language, if a term is defined and they're like, wait a minute, how is the energy code? What does the energy code mean when it uses that term? They need to know that it's defined, and they need to go to chapter 2 and find the definition. Okay, that's it. Do you guys have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Dimitri.
Yeah, is the intent for it still to be a PDF, or will it be online?
PDF.
PDF, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking like those defined terms, you could like, hover your mouse over it and it gives you the definition.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
You can do that in the reference ace. So if you use the Energy Code Ace reference ace, it has that exact feature.
Okay, right on.
Yep. Go ahead, Christian.
It's great. The effort is excellent. If you go back to the table of mapping the current standards to the new format. Yeah.
That one. Yep.
Where is the compliance submittals being given?
What do you mean by compliance submittals?
Usually in 90.1 there is a section, all the required submittals for, let's say, envelope.
That's in part 1.
Yeah.
Title 24, part 1, administrative code.
We're not
This is part 6.
We're not going to reorganize part 1. So part 1, we're not renumbering or reorganizing part 1.
Okay, good.
Part
Yeah.
1's not ours per se. Part 1 belongs to Title 20 Building Standards Commission. We only have Chapter 10 of Part 1 is our responsibility. And that formatting that we have in there right now follows what Title 24 Building Standards Commission has within their full Article 1 of Title 24.
I see, okay. And the second question is, you have one-to-many and many-to-one mapping, right, between the two tables.
Elaborate, please.
That's because additions are not their own chapter. Additions and alterations are incorporated.
Okay, in other words, if you take a new class in this new table, this could be referenced in many different locations of the previous table, or previous versions, right? And the same thing can happen now, that the new table can have sections. So your index is where I was going to, where you have this mapping.
Yeah.
And in that mapping table, is it possible to come up with one-to-many and identify just the sections that are impacting it? Just to simplify.
I'm not sure I fully understand your question.
Okay, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, sorry. Let's chat after.
I got one. I don't think I need one though, but, okay, I use it, yeah. Seems like a lot of, sorry.
You're good. Go for
Seems
it.
like a lot of good stuff came out of this, but I do have a question or concern that may not be valid. So this seems like this is directed towards contractors and specialized contractors. What about the general contractor? What about the homeowner? What about, I'm thinking mostly about like, maybe code officials that needs to see the whole picture. Additions and alterations. If I am a do-it-yourself person, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. Seems like that could be more complicated with this approach than with the existing. Because if I'm a homeowner, I just you know, I need to look at additions and alterations. And now I need to look at maybe several places. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I just want to ask you what you think.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the organization in the focus groups, and there were a lot of opinions. Primarily, energy consultants liked the way that it is now, I think because you guys do work with all building systems, so what you're describing. Most of the other disciplines don't, and they work with just one building system. Even somebody like a homeowner or a plans examiner that might work with all building systems, they're working with one system at a time. If you think about the plans examiner, they're gonna plan check the architectural sheets, and then they're gonna flip and plan check the mechanical sheets, and then the electrical sheets. So even though they are touching everything, they're looking at one thing at a time. I think even in your example with a homeowner that's doing an addition and includes all systems, they might be looking at what are the requirements for this HVAC system or this lighting system at one time. Gina has something to add.
I would love to add to that. If a homeowner or someone who doesn't understand the code just goes to additions and alterations, then they're screwing things up. What a perfect time to get a mic. Because there's trails of things in the mandatory chapters in 100 and in 110. And then we also then have to go to 150.0, 150.1 before we understand what's in 150.2. So this way we're getting everything in one bucket. And it's going to be the mapping of how things lead to one, especially for additions and alterations, I think will be easier for people.
Kathy?
So where did you land on the repeating information, duplicating information, especially for multifamily?
Yeah, we also had a lot of discussion about this in the focus groups, and the direction in the end was if you have to flip 2 chapters over and 200 pages to find the requirement, then you should just repeat it so that people aren't like flipping major code, you know, flipping through different chapters. If you're in the same chapter and you're just referencing another section, then you should just reference it and not repeat it. So there's probably going to be a mix. If we don't repeat it, we will obviously make a reference right to the other section, so it won't just be missing.
Okay, so any, for example, unitary DHW would be repeated in multifamily as opposed to reference to single family? Or
unlikely. The way that we structured the technical chapters is we put the multifamily last. So we're going to do non-residential, then single family, then multifamily. And the reason we put multifamily last is so we can reference back up to non-res and single family when the requirements are the same, exactly the same.
I have a process question that kind of goes off the repetition question. When the code needs to be updated, is there some sort of, I guess you would use the index to keep track of where those repetitions are? If there's a change in one thing that then needs to be, you know, iterated down, is there a way to make that, my efficiency brain is like, is there a way to make that programmatic? Like, how do you update the repetition and make sure that it's updated everywhere?
Yeah, and I think that's been part of why we haven't repeated now, because it is hard to update and we've just been referencing, but that's really a problem for users. So we're just going to have to help each other understand when requirements are exactly the same and make sure we're updating all the appropriate sections.
That was a problem this time, though. We clean up into multifamily.
Yeah.
There were some things that were repeated that weren't updated.
Yeah.
Is there a plan to have something in place to check that?
That's not my,
Okay. So
that's not my realm of responsibility, so we'll have to figure that out.
So from my perspective, and just my perspective, I hate repetition because of that same issue. We'll fix it one place, but we'll forget to fix it another place because we have different sources working on different areas. So someone is working on multifamily is changing the relative solar heat gain coefficient for one reason or another, but forgets to update that equation for the non-residential because, hey, I don't work in that area.
Yeah.
So that scares me a little bit.
Would you ever like have it generated? If you understand what I'm about to say, you're gonna laugh at me. Like generated by the tech, or like some sort of programmatic generation of the PDFs that the repetition areas could reference a single source of truth?
When I learn AI, sure. ChatGPT might be able to do that. I don't know. That's something we're going to have to think about.
You could have a standard format for reference.
Maybe, yeah.
So have a place where it's mentioned the first time, and then every other place references that, but repeats it in the standard format.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that Standard 205 is generated programmatically using LaTeX, so that anything that is repeated is automatically generated in the locations it appears. And it's a big change because it's a shift. Everyone here is very accustomed to Microsoft Word, but Microsoft Word is anti-automation. And so if you want to avoid some of these pitfalls, you have to, it's a training, it's a big training endeavor, so.
Sally was saying, any consideration for splitting out residential and non-residential as two separate documents?
Yeah, we talked about that during the focus groups, and like I said, the group was relatively split. We have the results here on how to organize, and so we talked about keeping the current organization, splitting it by building type, which is what you're talking about, or splitting it by system type. And you can see it's not too far off. We had a lot of people who did say that they would rather see it by building type. But in the end, and with all the discussion, system type won out.
Well, building type and system type. So you have the same structure, but you have two separate documents. So anyway.
Yeah, and what we talked about here is how do we split it first? Do we split it by building type first, like ASHRAE, and then go by system type, or do we split it by system type and then go by building type?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting, thank you. I think that we get used to the previous code, but the way that you presented it here, I think that it will be easier for future, so I'm looking forward to use the new format. My question is for Payam here. You were like slightly mentioned that we did have a duck curve, now we moved to the turkey curve neck. How can we prevent it to become like a giraffe neck? Like my fear is that we are going to have a lot of outage, right? So what is our strategy to prevent those outages?
Actually, what you're just talking about is something that we're looking at today, and I think we're talking to our utility team, Southern Cal Edison, PG&E, SMUD, and others, try to prevent that from happening. So I'm hoping it's not going to happen. We're already aware of it, and we're looking through it right now.
We have a question over here.
Oh, I can. So this was step one, Sally. So what's step two? What's the rollout, education, training? How's that getting rolled out?
Yeah, step two is to build it, which is what we're doing right now. So we're putting the draft together, and then obviously the commission will review and publish the PDF. We are doing outreach. I think we had a, sorry, let me bring the timeline. Yeah, so we started outreach in September at the CalBEM conference. So we gave the same presentation to the energy consultants at CalBEM. Now we're talking with you guys, so there is going to be a lot of outreach. I think the commission plans on doing a workshop at some time next year to continue that outreach. And then I believe that case authors are going to be working with the Restructured as well through the rulemaking. So there will be a lot of exposure way prior to any kind of rulemaking process.
Are we talking to industry groups like California, AIA, and others, like just for bigger outreach?
Yes, all industries, everybody who uses the code.
So Nikhil, when we present the template for 2028, which I should be working on right now, sorry, we will do the presentation here and provide a rollout for that, because the template has a section that you have to provide the language that you want to see in the code. And we need to present this new format. So that's what you're going to be using to fill in that template for the 2028. So it'll probably be on the same workshop. And we will be providing training and to building officials. And we're going to have to be looking and talking to the energy consultants and see how we provide training to them also. We are under-resourced at this time. Unfortunately, we lost quite a few positions at the Energy Commission, and we lost one of our supervisors on that area of training. So stay tuned.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Two comments and then a question. So first comment is, who here has heard of photosynthetic photon efficacy? And yeah, that's a strange concept. And I think we've been asking every 3 years to do the italics just like just about every other standard does. So that's really welcome. The idea of having the new code section, and then in parentheses the old code section. The IGCC, the International Green Construction Code, makes use of technical content from ASHRAE 189, and that's exactly what they do. So they have it in their I-codes type format with the all the periods and the different levels, and then they have the in parentheses the 189. So someone who's used to using 189, they can look at IGCC and see the cross reference. And then finally, a little bit more controversially, as you saw, there was half of the people were questioning the whole idea of repeating everything. The multifamily, how this was rolled out was painful, and to the extent that there can be something simpler that actually looks at referencing these other sections, I think that's really valuable in terms of simplicity. Oh yeah, the dwelling units are essentially single-family code, and the non-dwelling units are essentially the non-residential section. So it makes it really simple for people to understand, yeah, there's some differences, and that multifamily section primarily references those other sections. And I'll just give an example of something that's really kind of crazy is, for outdoor lighting, we have one way of calculating the allowed wattage for outdoor lighting, and that's different for multifamily, and it's different than it is for non-residential. So those tables, they're not repeated. They're actually very different. And just think about how kind of weird it is if I've got a mixed-use multifamily building. I've got a parking lot that's maybe used by both. So as part of this restructuring, ideally there's some thought about restructuring multifamily, how that just sort of revisit the headache that is, the massive amount of pages, the amount of repetition that yeah, I know I'm scaring some people over here, but I would think about that as a code cleanup in addition to restructuring. And so I guess the question, I'd like to know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point and something that's going to have to be addressed with 2028. The Commission has told us that we can't change any of the language, including cleanup, for the restructured standards. So we are staying as close to the adopted language as we possibly can. We'll have to change some titles and things, right? Because we're moving stuff around and reorganizing, but we are not changing any of the language. So I'll say this, the restructured standards may be a little bit messy because we're taking something that was organized in a different way, and we're totally reorganizing it and trying not to change the language. So there will need to be some cleanup in 2028 because of the reorganization.
Yeah. Before we go, one note I just want to bring up, that what we're doing right now with our reformatting and restructuring, the California Building Standards Commission is also doing the same thing. for 2025, not for 2028. So they're one step ahead of us. Currently, if you go into their standards, you'll see it's a double column, right? And they have their tables at the end of the chapter. So now they're reformatting it to a single column, and their tables right after the literature. So it's not at the end of the chapter, it's right after the topics being presented. So that will be something new that they will be rolling out. And one of the reasons they're rolling it out that way is because they saw how the Energy Commission submits our package to them in a single column. Anyways.
Hey, Sally.
If you have hyperlinks, why do you need to repeat the language? It's just provide a hyperlink.
What we heard in the focus groups is that people don't want to flip 250 pages to a different section to find.
But this is PDF,
same
is
language.
online, right?
Well,
so you just provide a hyperlink. They can, instead of, this is not on paper, right?
we do have quite a few people that still use the paper.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're trying to accommodate both.
Oh, okay.
Also, my budget's limited to what county can do.
RJ?
Yeah. Any changes for part 11 from this?
We're really just focusing on part 6 right now.
RJ, part 11 has their own format. If you notice, their numbering is different. So we're only dealing with part 6 here, not even part 1 title. Because their format's already separated from what we're doing.
But the numbering follows the other parts, right? Like the energy code uses 140.3A to CII. And we heard from users that's very difficult to remember. And so we're changing it to follow the building code and the other parts of Title 24 to just use the sequence of numbers. I think that's also going to be hard to remember. 600.1.2.3.4. But we're following the other parts of Title 24 with the numbering. All right, we're around, so let us know if you guys have any other questions.
Awesome. Talk about starting from where we are and taking the next marginal step. You guys are doing incredibly difficult and essential work, and kind of like Amir said, it's the people work that needs to happen to let our systems talk to each other. So just thank you. You guys are incredible. You and your team. You guys rule.